Hi, folks.
Hey there.
I guess we can get started. We have a bunch of new folks who are joining the meet. Do you guys want to introduce yourself just so that we know your interest in Scorecard?
Yeah, sure. Hi.
Go ahead, Varun.
Yeah, my name is Varun, and I'm the founder of Step Security. And I've probably interacted with some of you on pull requests and stuff. So I just thought I'll join and contribute.
Welcome.
Hello, this is Eric Tice with Wipro Technologies. I lead the Technical Consulting and Center of Excellence for the Open Source Program Office within Wipro. And we're doing a lot of initiatives around software supply chain security this year, and working to become more involved in OpenSSF in general and a number of the working groups. So this is one of the main reasons I've joined, and I look forward to collaborating with all of you.
Okay.
Hey everyone, I am Stephen Augustus. I'm the head of open source at Cisco. Outside of that, I wear a few hats across the communities. So to do group steering, the Kubernetes steering, I run the release engineering team for Kubernetes as well. Yes, agreed to all of the things that Eric said. Software supply chain security is super important, and we should all be getting active there. So I've started to contribute in a few places across All-Star and Scorecard. I'm also one of the new Scorecard maintainers. So.
Welcome.
Welcome.
So I believe I might be the only other new person here, although I'm not new to a couple of you. Hi, I am VM Brasseur. You can call me Vicky because we're all friends here. I work with Eric at Wipro. We're both in the open source program office. I am director and senior strategy advisor here at Wipro and the open source program office. I've been around for open source software for a long time, been in a lot of different spaces. I work with Mr. Augustus on the to-do group and the steering committee. Know Mr. Wheeler from SPDX and various other things. Yeah, so I've just been around. And the software supply chain is something I've been concerned with and working on for several years. So I'm very excited to see the direction that that this project has been taking, and decided time to start chipping in.
Welcome. So just FYI, we also have a Slack channel. So if any of your folks are interested, we are also pretty active there. You guys can consider joining that, and we are available there. Anyone else? I know John, any other? Hey.
My name is Aditya. I'm a PhD candidate at NYU. I am interested in the software supply chain space. I'm one of the contributors / maintainers of the Intoro project. I came across this project through a discussion on the OpenSSF Slack about code review, and one of the things I'm interested in general is dependency security. So I figured I'd sit in and kind of start learning what this project's all about.
Nice. Welcome.
Anyone else?
Hey, I guess we're doing interest. My connection went for a minute. So hi, I'm Bella Weisman. I'm leading engineering for open source at Goldman Sachs. We recently joined the OpenSSF, and definitely looking at how we can leverage things, including the scorecards, to help with our open source consumption and contribution. So the scorecard looks really interesting, and looking forward to learning more about it, and especially programmatic integration, most important.
Cool. Okay, is that it? Anyone else wants to go?
I'm wondering if everybody should introduce themselves since we have so many new people. So I'll go. I'm Jeff Mendoza. I work at Google in the open source security team, and my primary project is All-Star.
I mean, do you want to give a brief intro of yourself?
Sure. Okay. Naveen Srinivasan. I've been contributing to Scorecard for probably about a year. Pretty much interested in supply chain security, being doing that. That's pretty much me.
Cool. I can go next. I'm Azim. I primarily work on scorecards. Yeah, I also sometimes help out Jeff with All-Star. So just in case folks don't know, All-Star is this other project that works, integrates very well with Scorecard. It's a policy board that also this group is trying to develop. So if you're interested in Scorecard, I would highly recommend you check out All-Star too.
Okay, I suppose I could go. Oh, go ahead, Laurent.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Sure. So my name is Jonathan Metzman. I work at Google on OSS Fuzz, which is a fuzzing solution that's used by a lot of open source projects that probably many people use, like OpenSSL and curl. And I'm basically wanted to discuss some how sort of Scorecards is gonna how it like how it basically integrates with fuzzing.
I will quickly add that Log4j in the middle of December added OSS Fuzz, was recently added to OSS Fuzz. I have no idea why that might have happened, but thank you so much for all your work. I really appreciate it.
Okay, so I'm the last, I guess. Everyone has introduced themselves. Hey, hi, I'm Laurent. I'm also at Google. I work closely with Azim and Jeff, and I work on Scorecard and other things like best security practices, and also on Salsa on GitHub. Yeah, that's about me.
Cool. So I was wondering, since we have a lot of folks, maybe we can put the updates towards the end. If you have any open items, maybe you can start with that. Like I know Jonathan has been wanting to discuss the CI first integration for a while now. So Jonathan, do you want to start with that?
Sure. Thank you very much. So basically, what the main purpose of why I came here today was to ask if Scorecards would consider having an exception for CI fuzz in its enforcement of requiring GitHub actions to be pinned. And the reason why I think CI fuzz might sort of needs this exception is because of the way OSS fuzz is structured. So CI fuzz is a action that does fuzzing in CI, and it's basically used by OSS fuzz users to sort of find bugs more quickly than they would just by using OSS fuzz and having to wait for OSS fuzz to report it to them. Here they get the crash in their pull request. And so the way OSS fuzz is structured is that when a project is added to OSS fuzz, they add a build file and a build script basically, and a Docker file to OSS fuzz. And that tells OSS fuzz how to build their project. Now, CI fuzz is part of the same repository as OSS fuzz. And so this introduces a sort of thing that's a bit unusual, which is that in order to build the actual project, the actual project's fuzzers, you need the up-to-date source code of the action. There's actually almost like a dependency on the action from the source repo, for the repo that's using the action. And so this makes it really hard to pin CI fuzz as an action, because suppose a user of CI fuzz were to update their Docker file. If the CI fuzz were pinned, they wouldn't be using the latest version of that Docker file, and their build would break, which could make it pretty difficult for people to use CI fuzz if it needs to be pinned. So yeah, came here to ask if there could be an exception, and yeah, would be interested in having a discussion along those lines.
Here's how, just for those of you who don't know me, I lead the OpenSSF Best Practices Badge, what used to be named the CII Best Practices Badge. So we've had years trying to refine criteria. I would suggest that where possible, instead of an exception, that we tweak the criteria to what was meant, if that's appropriate, so that the next group, if they're in a similar situation, doesn't have to make the request. The trick, of course, is to figure out if we can craft it, what that language would look like. I'm not opposed per se to an exception, but if the requirement's too broad, maybe we need to refine it. And I see Jonathan raise his hand, which I probably should have. Sorry about that.
Hello. It sounds like so if my understanding is the salsa, or the high level problem is that you want the build that is being used to build the artifact, that is the release from the build, to be the thing that is immutable, right? So presumably an auxiliary build that runs in parallel, as long as that build is being run in such a way that it is not the thing that is producing the published artifacts, could theoretically be the thing that is unpinned. And as long as you're not using OSS fuzz as a part of your, the output of whatever the thing is that is using OSS fuzz as part of your resultant build artifacts, that would be something that would be potentially safe, right? Not pinning for things that are part of resultant build artifacts that are going to be relied upon by downstream users.
Basically, if I can simplify it, pin the things that will produce production results, not necessarily the test system. Is that a fair restatement?
Yes, but I presume that what the goal here is to make sure that if things are unpinned, that they are running in an environment that is intentionally segregated off from the rest of the infrastructure, such that if that thing is unpinned, it can't maliciously impact the build results of the other CI pipelines.
Other than it can affect it in the sense that it will accept something. You'll get a signal, but that's all you get. A thumbs up, thumbs down is okay, but that's the only thing it can send to the production.
Yeah, right, exactly. So is the concern about pinning that you don't want something to be, somebody to hijack an account and then be able to publish a new version of that thing for typo squatting or something similar? Or what is the high level goal of trying to prevent, or requiring a locked in commit version or something like that?
Okay, can I unpack that specifically on why you will need that to be pinned? Okay, the example, the simple attack vector is you can have an action, GitHub action that is not pinned, and you might be using on a specific Git tag, and and everything is fine and dandy, and one find somebody malicious, even the dev or somebody else can start siphoning your secrets from from GitHub into their own custom server, but you would be trusting that the SHA never changed by using the version. But if you pin the SHA and if you test it with that, things shouldn't change. That's the primary attack vector. That's one of the primary attack vectors that is primarily trying to solve.
Can I poke two holes in that real quickly? SHA-1 is known to have collisions, and if the maintainer just deletes their repository, wouldn't that break the build too? The action that's hosting the repository.
Absolutely, yes, it will. But whatever we have that we're trying to solve that specifically, SHA-1 having collisions is a bigger problem. But with what we have right now, we're trying to solve that specifically. And if somebody deletes a repository, then might as well fork that and move on to something else.
Yeah,
I
I
can
think in the
also,
case, sorry, yeah, I think in the case that the repository is deleted, that's a different discussion altogether, right? There are no tags, there are no SHAs anyway.
yeah, something I wanted to add is that having hash pinning is essentially very similar to having code review. So basically, what you run is what you've reviewed. So if you have pinning, it tells you exactly the exact copy of the dependency that you're running. And if you ever get an incident response where you need to check, okay, when was I vulnerable, then you can go back to your commit history, and you can look at those hashes that were vulnerable, which is going to be a lot smaller than this wide range version 1 that probably is like, you've been running version 1 for a very long time. And so that's going to make it a lot more difficult for you to pinpoint, the specific runs of your workflows that were vulnerable or not, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'll add there, I think, is that GitHub Actions actually sort of like logs, I think, the commit that the action was run on, I believe. But I think the log like possibly, might not be retained forever. And obviously, it would be easier if you just like could see, okay, it stopped here. But actually, I had a question actually about what Naveen said, just because I think it raised an interesting point, which was that like, yeah, like what is the harm of a sort of like rogue GitHub action? And would it be possible to, in the workflow, basically like lock it down so that, the worst thing, a malicious CI fuzz action could do is just tell you that you have like a fuzzing bug when you don't actually? Like was that possible, or is this not possible with GitHub Actions?
Right now, it's not possible. At least Varun is trying to solve something about this in his thing. Again, I'm not speaking for Varun, but right now it's not possible.
If I recall, for example, a GitHub action has access to all sorts of secrets, right? I mean, I haven't really delved into this, but I imagine there's other folks who have. Am I correct?
You can't separate.
For any secrets you drop on the repo, yeah. It's got that.
Yeah. I mean, to add, what I can say is that, let's say someone was running a workflow where they're running OS fuzz and they're not actually, doing anything else. So you could actually then restrict the GitHub token permission for that workflow, and you can say that this is contents read. And I mean, I'm assuming OSS fuzz doesn't need anything else. So even if OSS fuzz were to get compromised, one can then not steal, let's say, the GitHub token. The problem is that you cannot really tell all the developers to not use OSS fuzz in workflows, that also have their Docker secrets and stuff like that. So what happens is they can have this one big workflow which is doing their test and build and release, publish to NuGet and NPM and all that places, and then that governance gets very hard to do. In fact, token permissions, getting them to set token.
I challenge that a little bit, because couldn't you check your permissions, right? Like, I for example was doing SSH keys on my local machine, and OpenSSH pitched a fit when I had wrong permissions on the file. Like, it had all open permissions when it tried to open the file, right? Couldn't you just do something similar with OS fuzz, where it pitches a fit if you are running it in an environment where the credentials that it has are way too wide? If you run it in like a secure mode that is like required by the scorecard, right? Like, if you can use it unpinned if you use a secure mode, and it'll pitch a fit if you have credentials that are too wide.
Yeah, so something that was mentioned in, I think, as we're talking about like the scorecard pre-submits themselves, right, is that like we have an opportunity to kind of like split out the scorecard pre-submits into like, are we building, are we testing, are we verifying something, right? The verify scripts shouldn't need any permissions to run, right? This is something that you can segment to a separate GitHub action that has only read to the repo, supposedly, right?
So I think what Stefan is saying, that I mean, I agree. I mean, there's a way that you can configure your your OSS first to be secure, but you need more granularity than what Scorecard today exposes. Like today I think we've taken a generic approach where we say we flag things that look bad, and we'd like to improve on this later to have more flexibility in terms of policies that people can use on top of the results. And if an organization says, I'm fine that there's OSS fuzz so long as there's no secrets in the workflow and the tokens don't have right to content or to packages, then that's fine. So we'd like to support this in the future, but we're not there yet. So I just wanted to say that.
Right, but I think
can help.
I think.
Are we tracking this?
Yeah,
Sorry?
I think what we should do is figure out what the right criterion is, hopefully, and then figure and working out how to automate it and not be necessarily constrained to what the tool currently can find today, as long as we can figure out a way to get there.
So
yeah, I think, yeah.
Sorry, I mean, I was just adding on to what Lauren said. Like, I wonder if the criterion here should be we only penalize unpinned GitHub actions if that particular action has potential of leaking secrets. So we kind of actually do that in two different ways now. We do it using dangerous workflows and pinned dependencies separately. I wonder if Scorecard should be like, be a little more smart about it, and that way we don't need a special exception for OSS first.
Careful. I think it's much more than just revealing secrets. It's confidentiality, but it's also integrity. In fact, I would say it's all CIA. If the subverted one can cause either release of data that's supposed to be kept secret, or it can subvert the later pipeline, then I think we start worrying. If it's just a whether or not it passes, I guess that's an availability concern, but I think we can accept that. Hey, I didn't pin it and it produced a fail when it should have produced a success. Okay, if it produces a success when it should have produced a fail, I mean, no test is perfect. If it produces a fail when it should have been a success, somebody's going to go look. So I think as long as it can't reveal secrets or change the result of a later artifact, I think we're good. Yes, no?
Yeah, that would already go a long way. I think what Azim said about token permissions and dangerous workflows being two different checks today, and we've already thought of kind of merging those two at some point. Then I guess we'll reduce the number of people who complain. I suppose there'll still be people who say, hey, I have a workflow, and guess what? It's calling into GCP. So now I have access to GCP stuff. So that would be, yet something that we wouldn't capture. But I agree, that would be a step forward. Even though pinning I think should still be encouraged in general. Yeah, so that's my 2P.
Jonathan, what does that work? Well, I don't know what you think about this.
Yeah. So what's really the conclusion then? Yeah, like what's the conclusion then? Like, I'm not really sure.
So if I understand correctly, I mean, I'm trying to summarize it. I could be wrong, but I think there are two directions or like two solutions here. One is we can solve it on the policy side of it. Basically, we can still complain and say that, hey, you have a CI first action which is unpinned, but you can ignore it using policy. And the other is we can make a checks itself more smarter and say that if you're using this action in a workflow which there is no potential of it leaking a secret, then maybe we don't complain about this action being unpinned.
So, I mean, I frankly think both are good ideas. Like improving scorecards to be more accurate is great. And I think having the ability to turn things off, like, sorry, by policy, you meant it's like per repo specific, like they could say, like, actually, this is okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a terrific idea. And I think I won't even go into, just because it's not the point of why I came today, like, we do want to use scorecards on OSS fuzz, and OSS fuzz, like within the repo, like has like, tons and tons of unpinned Docker images. And that's, and that's sort of by design. And, many other unpinned things and pulling from master, because we need to build the latest thing. And, having the ability for like the repo owner to actually like clarify, like, no, this is really okay. I mean, I think that would help us a lot with that.
Yeah, I guess. So just to get back to this is, I think policy right now are more like policies that someone who consumes the results would apply to the results, not the producer. So because if we let you just decide what's good and not good, like, that's kind of an open door for everyone to say, oh, this is fine, just ignore it. So if we want to go that way of saying this is okay for my repo, I guess there has to be some sort of vetting process where it's clear that, okay, OSSF has agreed that, okay, it's currently okay to say that it's fine and we're not going to bug you, but I think that has to be clear somewhere, because someone else is going to come and say, hey, there's an exception for OSSF. What's the exception? How about me?
Or as I have suggested earlier, two results. One is here's the raw data, and here's the version that the project asserts, accepting that there's project changes, and the project says that's okay, but knowing that this is different.
Okay, so that means every project comes and says, I want this change. Do we start accommodating that?
No, as in the project can put in their repo some file that says, hey, I know Scorecard's going to say this doesn't work. We say it's okay, and here's why. And then you can get a report that says, like, here's the Scorecard data, and here's what the project asserts the value is and why they believe that's so.
Yeah, the Scorecard ignore file or something.
Yeah.
Or scorecard.conf or .yaml or something like that.
Definitely much better if you can actually programmatically verify, right? Because even if there was a vetting process, you don't know that the next commit doesn't then do something that intentionally or unintentionally, right, undoes the entire premise of the reason why the exemption was given.
If you're going to do that, then I would suggest don't bother with an ignore file. Just have it do it automatically. Now, I will say from experience with the best practices badge, the number of things that you can't automate is discouragingly large. That's why we have some automation, but most of the criteria are not automated, because we went exactly the opposite direction of Scorecard. What's important, not what can be automated. The Scorecard folks are this group. What can we automate? It's a good question, and each approach has its pros and its cons. I mean, the big con to the badging project is you have to have all this work of the project, and you have to, you can record what they say, but it's just what they say. The Scorecard folks, it actually is the reality, but it's hard to do.
So to add up on what David said, so something we haven't mentioned, but in the team we're working on a scorecards.dev website where we will present the results, and maybe this is a place where we can surface what the website. Let's say if you have a test that's failing or you have a score of 3, you can have a note saying this is what the developer is saying to explain the result and why it might be okay. But I think the concern that Jonathan has is that typically because we give a score and people look at the score, then the score becomes the thing that people are just looking at. And I don't know whether if we tell users, hey, you can add a note saying that you disagree with those results, or here's an explanation why this isn't good. I don't know if that would solve Jonathan's problem, which seems to be more like, I'm not happy with my score kind of problem.
So,
as somebody who kind of runs, like, go ahead. Sorry. I mean, like from our side as like consumers, right? Like you can't scale like that, right? Like we have like tens of thousands of applications, right, that are running with thousands of dependencies, and like ultimately at some point it's just going to be an API that's going to get called, right? And it's going to say that you can't use this thing, right? And yes, somebody can go and raise an exception, but honestly, like it's at some point it just doesn't scale. So you're getting like to a programmatic point, at least for like the really important stuff, is really important to us.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think those are two different use cases. There's someone looking at a repo that just wants to see, okay, is it good, not good? And there's someone who tries to automate everything that flows into their prod. And there you'll be able to actually use policies to write what you want, what you don't want. And that will be independent on whatever the score of Scorecard is. Because we're building this new feature in Scorecard where we'll give you the raw results, and you can decide that the action name was OSSF. That's fine with me, and you can decide that this is fine, and you don't have to look at the score or like. So I think the scores are more for human, but for machines, like the policies will be there.
So I just want to note, so just want to note here that like some of what we're talking about, like this being able to opt in, opt out, like that, not specifically for this, but that configuration capability exists in All-Star already, right? If you plop All-Star on and you configure your org, you've got a bunch of config files to flip these dials. Is it, would it be useful? Is it possible that we extract some of that logic and bring it into a place that's repeatable for both All-Star and Scorecard?
So let me answer that, Stephen, for you. So Jeff and Astra are actually working on a project to actually do that for this quarter. And I kind of wanted to like build on what Lauren said. So there are two problems here, right? One is the consumer producer type of a thing. One is where repositories want to improve their own scorecard scores, or rather they want to make sure that they don't get false positives, for which there is the policy file solution that Laurent is working on currently. But there's also the other side, like Bella said, where they want to probably use an API and get their dependency scorecard, and that shouldn't be opinionated. And that's also what we want. There won't be any policies, but like how we discussed, we might have smarter ways of saying that this dependency is not paid. Sorry?
So for Bella's case, there could be policy, like as a consumer, I could have
the
policy for.
The policy will be applied on the person calling the API, but the API itself will be giving you an objective result. The raw result, saying that this was unpinned, and it's really up to the API consumer to decide whether that's safe or unsafe. If that makes sense. I kind of feel like we all agree here. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that, like, but the more information, the better. Meaning, like, I don't know as a program, right, that something's unpinned, whether that's safe or not. But I need more information to make that determination. Maybe it can be done programmatically, maybe not. But like, just like, I can't craft a policy without data on whether it is or is not safe. That's like, both are required, I think.
Actually, I would add something else, which is something I've raised before. I think that every single criterion in scorecards should include a rationale. Why is this a criterion? Because every time somebody raises an exception, the first question that they're going to ask is why? Why is this a criterion? And and it may turn out, for example, that here's the reason. Oh, that reason's ridiculous. That doesn't apply. Well, then there's no reason that you need to do that. And so that would, unfortunately, Bella, that would mean that you might have to go back and see that for now, but at least you'd have some information to work with.
So something, so just FYI, so currently the way that this isn't yet, it's not set in stone. And in fact, this is really something we'd like to have feedback on. But so what we've been thinking about, for example, the workflows, token permissions, pin dependencies, and all that, is basically to give you to have the output be a digested version of a workflow where you have all the fields with the action names, the permission, and whether they are running certain commands, and then you can just inspect this yourself through your own policy and decide if that's okay. So you would be able to come up with your own policies. We would just give you a trimmed down version, digested version of what a workflow is. And if you have some policies you have in mind, I mean, something I would really like as action item for you guys is if you could like tell us the sort of policies you'd like to be able to run. That would be also useful to be sure we're in the right direction. And what we can do in the next meetings, we can actually show you maybe the structure of what we have in mind, so we can tweak it all together to make sure that this seems to work. Because I think Azim and I have been discussing this a lot, and we're still not sure. about all the details.
And just
so
I just want to add on that, like the idea of having the raw data and then writing a policy. Also, currently, Scorecards currently does that. Like it gathers data and it has a built-in decision on a score, which is what is publicized. That current like default policy will be available, right? So Scorecards will still have like a default scoring and a policy that's, I guess, the recommended one. So nobody has to start from scratch and figure out, do I like pin dependencies or not?
So two things. I want to be a little conscious of time, and because it looks like we have a few other things on the agenda. And two, like, is this documented? Like the work that you're doing in terms of like refactoring some of this, the actual request, is any of it documented in the repo? If not, like we should link that stuff up.
Lauren, I think there is a GitHub issue for this, right? So maybe we can add Stephen, CC Stephen to that. I think we also have a doc which is kind of linked in the same issue.
Yeah, but the doc doesn't really say anything about the structure of the results, which I think is the main pain point. So I think we should take like code review as an example, and maybe token permission, dangerous workflows, because those basically require a view of a workflow. So I guess those would be the two that we could start for a discussion. And maybe next meeting we can. I mean, we'll add this in the issue, and next meeting we can bring it up as an open issue.
Sure.
Does that work for everyone? Or? Okay. And Bella, please, action item for you is give us some examples of policies. That'd be super useful if you want to be able to.
Yeah, we're early days, honestly. We definitely early days here, but I will try to think about it and come back with some ideas and talk to some of those folks on my side.
I had a little bit of trouble following the discussion just because I'm a bit, unfamiliar with scorecards, and it's an interesting point you all made about, like, is like the result like for the consumer, or is it for like the the repo itself? And I guess there's like one last point I wanted to make is like I sort of wonder if like just like if you just raise the fact that there's this like pinning issue, like is that making should consumers feel like that like the repo is less secure because of that, or is it really like more secure in the end because it's fuzzing? And then another point I would think might be interesting to think about is that at least like other sorts of like static analysis tools, there's almost always like a way for like to basically flag something as like a sort of false positive, and I suppose that could be just because the consumer is different in that case, like it's like someone like you trust yourself that you're labeling it properly, but it's another thing I think to consider if it's just sort of making people think that like the repo is like less secure than another one that's not doing fuzzing at all.
You got a good point. Fuzzing is way critical than just this, but it's a hard problem in my 2 cents on this. Giving an exception, like having an exception for same thing what Lauren mentioned, giving an exception to one, then it's going to unpack the can of worms as to how many more are we going to keep doing, what are the criteria and all that.
Sure. So, I mean, I think I didn't really like set for like, I think David mentioned like, it'd be necessary to have a criteria to know when to apply it or not. And I guess I didn't really fully flesh that out. So maybe we could continue that discussion on the issue tracker then.
Yeah. Can someone create that as an issue? And I'll create an issue on the everything needs a rationale. In fact, I just did.
Yeah, I'll create the issue.
Okay.
Okay. Should we move on to some other topics we have on the agenda? So I think we clearly won't be able to hit all of them. So Lauren, do you want to pick which? I think most of these were probably added by you. Do you want to pick which one we should discuss? So we can skip the V5 milestone thing for this meet.
Yeah, we can. So Lauren, do you want to talk about the vulnerabilities that the dependency tree that Abhishek created?
Yeah, that might be.
Yep.
Yeah. So I just wanted to ask first if any of the newcomers have other things they'd like to talk about first, or
I have a very boring process-related thing. Just as maybe the only person here from like a bank, I am not allowed to use chat on Zoom. Google Docs is also blocked for me. I don't really have such great solutions, but just kind of like bringing that up. So just, I don't know, like at some point, I mean, maybe I'll take it offline and we can just try to think, just something to be conscious of.
Oh.
Are
We have
there
to
any
actually have
restrictions
all
on
our
using?
I'm sorry.
Sorry, are there any restrictions on using GitHub?
And actually, GitHub we're able to use. It's like one of the only ways that we can collaborate. So GitHub's a good thing for us.
So we run into this kind of in to-do group too, and VM is familiar that, so we have like basically all these different ways to chat. Some of it is Zoom chat, some of it is Slack, some of it is private mailing lists. And most recently we created like a private discussion forum on GitHub for folks who cannot use one of those various things. Would people be in favor of having a like enabling discussions for various repos here?
I would. We have a similar
GitHub
problem at Wipro.
discussions. Yeah.
Thank you. And yeah, whatever you're doing for to-do group, I mean, that's been useful, right? Like you can, Google Groups are okay because you can do that via email, which is fine. And then having GitHub discussions, I've also used that. So those are all good things. And I mean, it's fine. Like you guys can definitely chat on Zoom, but like just being conscious that some of us can't. So like, I can't even ask you like on Zoom on the chat, like, can you add me, right? Like.
Yeah, inclusivity is important. So it's something we should look at.
Cool, thank you. Anyways, on to more interesting and fun topics.
I think Varun has his hand up. Varun, you want to ask something?
In terms of what to discuss, I wanted to, I don't really know how you manage the agenda and stuff, so I didn't really put it there, but I wanted to have a discussion, more of a brainstorming around increasing scorecard adoption. And, I can tell you what my interest is there in it. I mean, of course, it's good for everybody, but Step Security has certain solutions which help you, implement the scorecard checks, sort of automatic remediation, things like setting token permissions or pinning dependencies. And obviously they get, used more by the open source community if there's more adoption. So I just want to sort of, have a discussion about what are the ideas or what are the things already in, in play in order to increase the adoption of scorecards.
I can speak to it a bit. So I mean, we are basically trying to leverage on the fact that we are a part of OpenSSF. So we are mostly going around in different OpenSSF working groups and asking folks if you are part of the OpenSSF, like if your organization is part of OpenSSF, like let's say it's Microsoft or GitHub, we are asking folks to go and install Scorecard on your repos. So far, actually, Lawrence, a Scorecard action has got a bit of traction. So we've seen some of TensorFlow and Flutter from Google have already installed it. So we are hoping that we can get some of these big, commonly used critical repos to kind of adopt it and show that this is something that is trustworthy. It's something that's useful, and drive adoption there. So we don't have like a big plan, but it's more of hoping that word of mouth and that kind of thing can help drive us forward. Sorry, Jeff, I think you want to add something.
Go.
I was going to say, I think a next big splashy thing we'll do is the website. Isn't that the scorecards.dev?
Yeah, we do have the website coming up soon. That should be something that's kind of what we're planning. Timeline is by the end of the quarter. So yeah, that is another hope that we can actually increase our web presence so that when people search for Scorecard today, I think it directs them to something else, but at least with the website, we can improve that.
There are also other directions we've talked about, just to add to what Azim said. So I think one is through the Omega project. So we're going to give them a list of top things that the repo maintainers should fix once they've finished working with the Alpha Omega project, and one of them will be to install Scorecard, to keep track of issues. We also have the work stream on documentation, where we can, ask users to install Scorecard as part of the best security practices. And I think another avenue is also through the CI badges that David runs. That would also be potentially another avenue. I know we've mentioned it before, and maybe this in the future. So another thing before David maybe replies to the CI badges is, do you think we should try to, some of us, or go through a vendor to identify some of the critical projects and try to work with them, maybe by sending a pull request and see if some of them would be interested in in installing Scorecard? Is that a good approach, or is it too ad hoc, or like, any thoughts?
I try to take the top criticality that part of the OpenSSF, which figures out. I try to send for the top 10 repos. Guess what happened? Most of them didn't care about it. They said, "You guys, we're not going to take this headache. We're not going to take care of all of this." So it is hard to convince, because security is not a primary concern right now for at least the top 10 repositories. I tried the top 10 repositories. It was not easy from what I practically tried doing it.
So that's a good point. So if there are some pain points that we should know about, like what is preventing people from installing?
So example, I don't know whether I want to talk about this at this meeting. People don't want to pin. They said they trust the action. It doesn't add value. The second comment I got is primarily especially Dependabot. They said Dependabot is going to create a bunch of PRs. It's going to add work to the maintainers. It's okay. We're going to push it under the rug. If there are issues, we're not going to worry about them. I don't blame them, but this is their response to what it is. I want to let Stephen talk.
So in the sorry, go ahead.
Sure. I just want to say for a minute, I'm probably missing some context here in terms of what the maintainers actually have to do, because my understanding was that the OSSF scorecard works regardless of whether maintainers opt in. Are there some things that they need to opt into, or it's just a matter of trying to get them to do things so that their score is better?
Yes.
So yes,
Okay.
it's two
So
things,
on the
right?
latter,
Yeah.
yes.
It's a
On the
ladder.
latter, I would actually say, like, maybe we need to focus from the other side. Instead of trying to get the maintainers to adopt the scorecard and to kind of align to that, we need to focus on getting the users, right, the consumers, to start caring about it. And then once the consumers start saying, let's say, or like a user says, hey, we want to use your open source repo, but we noticed that you're not using whatever, you're not pinning your dependencies, or you're not pinning your actions, or you're not using whatever the tool, Dependabot, right? So then that's a little bit more of a push, because open source maintainers, while they don't want work, they do want adoption, right? So maybe we need to focus not on the maintainers, but on the users.
So
one idea that we've had. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So I would point out that because we are, like, this is a foundation within the LF, and I think we have an opportunity here to reach out to various foundations to ask their maintainers to help, right? So for example, like, this is something I can do on the Kubernetes side, right? So I manage the release engineering team, and all of our stuff I can put under, right? So it's like, I think we need to start with maintainers who are already partners and start building up that base. This is something that's really easy. Like, if I publish scorecard results, and in fact, I think, sorry, Jeff, I think you are, Naveen, you might have opened an issue on All-Star that said, like, let's eat our own dog food. And I posted the results for scorecard, right? So that's the kind of thing that we can break down into individual PRs and say, like, this is a good first issue, this is help wanted, or something like that, and start dragging users into contributing to these projects as well.
I encourage this. Oh, I'm sorry. Am I supposed to pull my hand up? Sorry.
I've not been doing that. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So a couple quick notes. First of all, I absolutely would encourage people to try to interact with projects. When I started the best practices project, I mean, we worked for almost a year with other projects trying to get, is this criteria make sense, and changing the criteria so that they would be sensible, if they're hard if they're hard but worth it, that's great. If they're hard because they're bad criteria, that's not good. Now, granted, we didn't have the requirements of must automate without any help, so that we intentionally simplified things. I will say, best practices badge, we actually made an effort. I don't remember. I think we've implemented almost all of these scorecards requirements, and I now get to shame you guys because you still haven't gotten a badge. Uh, you're still not on there. Shame on you.
Yeah, that's it.
Now, good news is Project Alpha is probably going to get announced next week. I mean, it's been existing for a while, and one of the things that they're intending to do when they interact with specific super high critical projects is they're going to audit them, but they're also going to try to help get them best practices badge and good scorecards measures. That does not solve it for everybody because they're only going to focus on a few projects, but there is some work on the way. More is better.
Cool. Another place that we've thought about trying to push Scorecard for consumers is through a package managers hub. So for example, if someone on NPM, if NPM were to adopt the NPM registry, when you go and look for a package, if they were to adopt Scorecard and show the Scorecard results for each of the packages, assuming they know what the origin of the package is, that would put Scorecard in the spotlight for everyone to look at. And in fact, in our team, we have someone from the Python Software Foundation, and I think that the goal is to show the Scorecard result in the PyPy dashboard, or at least pilot it.
I mean, a couple of points
What
on
about
my side, and yeah, sure. I mean, I don't know what the attitude here is, but I'm like, we've been speaking a lot to Tidelift, and I'm wondering if that might be a good partnership because they actually partner with maintainers and kind of give them money to do some of this stuff. So that might be a good partnership to look into. If I'm saying something controversial, then that's fine. And then secondly, just to point there again, like if it's a small amount of work, if we've gotten the criteria to a reasonable place, right, where it's not actually that much work for the maintainers to get a good scorecard, but they just don't have the time and the resources to actually get to a good scorecard, then obviously you do have the concern that if there is a critical vulnerability or something that really does go wrong, will they have the time and resources to do it then, right? So like it's reasonable to kind of want that still. But I thought, Jonathan, on chat, you brought up a really good point. The UOS model is, yeah, that could be very problematic.
I have a question. Sorry.
So yeah, I think we have a bunch of hands up.
So
I don't see the hand raised.
Yeah, so they're on the video faces. I think Tidelift is a great idea. I think that you have two to-do group folks here, or we can definitely chat about it, chat about using it because like I think that this is there. I mean, there are a bunch of different fronts, right? You've got the contributors, you've got the maintainers, you've got the sponsors of various projects, right? I think it would be helpful to to activate various company resources to convince people that this is a good idea. I think if we're doing it on the company side, or we've got company contributors that are kind of focused on those efforts or making it easy for people to contribute in that way. I think, related to that, as someone who's ramping up in Scorecard, there is an incredible amount of documentation and it's super awesome. There are a lot of issues and PRs to look through. I think that I opened an issue around like, is there a contributor ladder? But like, that's one portion of like, how do I contribute to this project in general, right? There's a contributing MD and it kind of goes into some stuff, but I think if it's even easier for people to understand how to contribute and remediate things within Scorecard, it's easy for maintainers or contributors to like point to those resources. Like, hey, you're on this repo and it's of this type, like here are some things that you should consider, right? And a lot of that is maybe documented already, but having things that are easy to point to just say like, hey, yes, you can go do this. Here's an issue template about how you would go about doing it for your repo.
How about you open an issue for that, Mr. Agassis? I know he's good at it. I think Jonathan has his hand up.
So just hi. I'm no longer with Gradle, but I worked for Gradle for about 2 years. And the Gradle ecosystem / Gradle itself, before I left, I was working pretty heavily on trying to get Dependabot support to work for Gradle, because Gradle's Dependabot support currently kind of sucks. As in sucks a lot. And we were having the problem of this all comes down to like locking your dependencies. Most, like in a majority of use cases, Gradle developers do not lock their dependencies. In addition, the infrastructure that we were trying to build around Dependabot theoretically didn't encourage you to lock your dependencies, because a lot of these automated tools like Dependabot try to rewrite your dependency lock files in ways that they don't know what they're actually doing, and the only thing that can do that is Gradle in a way that's sane. And so the question that, like, you know, I see the value in saying, yes, you got to lock your dependencies, but that like requirement in my, you know, at least from the perspective of Gradle, which is used to build 99% of all Android apps and 50% of all Java applications, just straight out won't work for, you know, today, and unless there's an investment in trying to figure out a way to solve that problem with Gradle moving forward.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So something I want to say is, right now in Scorecard, we only look for pinned dependencies for Golang, pip, and npm. So any other ecosystem language we don't currently support. So that wouldn't break anything on Gradle today. And we have a work stream in the best security practices to understand for every package manager what is the best security practices. And the goal is to then use this and implement it in Scorecard. And we don't have that yet. But if this is something that you know about, I think you should definitely join and help us out. We have no one working on Gradle, for example, right now.
Not totally my focus, but if you wanted to grab a time slot on my calendar, hit me up on the Slack afterwards, and I'm happy to brain dump on you, but I don't have the time to do the writing myself.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, it's not a priority for us yet either. We're trying to do npm and pip, so, you know, one step at a time. But if you know someone, and I'll keep in mind that I can brainstorm in the future when we get to Gradle. Thanks.
So a point that David made on a separate check, I think it was related to licensing or something, around gradation, right? Like, if something is bad, how bad is it? Like, it's not a binary, you know. It's like, this is, you know, you're going to get a score of 0, you're going to get a score of 10, right? For package managers that we are not actively supporting, there should be some gradation, right? If it's not supported at all, then fine, right? Then it just doesn't work. If it is supported in some sense, but it's in alpha state, right? Maybe that is a modifier for the score, right? If it's something that we expect to fully support, then we should be looking at it like, are we actually matching the security concerns that we have, right? So for Gradle, it doesn't exist today, like, but for something else that we had, GoMod, right? Like, if the dependencies are not, you know, then you can scream, then you can actually scream. But if I think it should be a little bit more relaxed for things that we're building up over time.
And the raw, I'm supposed to raise my hand, sorry. The raw data is should just say that we don't support it, right? There should be a null case, right? So that if you actually want to drill in, you know that there's just no data here, as opposed to like a score that looks like a 5 or something like that.
And right now, issue, and it should link to an issue.
Yes. Like today we don't scream or anything. We haven't found anything for Gradle because we don't look for it. So you'll get a score of 10. So maybe that's not what we want. Yeah. Okay. We should probably get a 0. Yeah. No, I agree. Good point.
Not a null, really, but you know.
Yeah.
Information that is not there. Yes.
Exactly. A score of 10 is kind of a little deceptive there, but unintentionally so.
We're at time. Can I take 10 seconds to note about scorecard.dev?
Yeah, David. Yes.
Yeah. So Okay, so we had some domain transferring problems. Kim started the transfer and it got stuck halfway through. I think we figured out what's going on, and I think we're going to get that fixed within a day. So
Yeah.
sorry,
Awesome.
we had to unwrap and figure out what the heck happened and how to fix it. So
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
yeah, so we don't know for sure, but hopefully that's all going to work out very soon.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks to David.
By the
We'll
way,
have our.
I found the scorecard on depth.dev if anybody's interested to know like how people find things. That's what I found the scorecard.
Nice.
That's all.
Cool. I think there are a bunch of topics, but we'll probably not get to it. I guess next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Nice to meet
Later,
everybody.
Yes.
folks.
Lovely to meet
Yeah.
you all.
Nice to meet
Nice
you.
Yeah, thanks for
See you.
coming. Come again.
See you, folks.